The push to legalize marijuana is gaining ground in Latin America, thanks to the growing frustration over the failed U.S.-led war on drugs. Many countries, including Mexico, are now looking for a less violent approach. Uruguay's unprecedented plan to legally put the government at the center of the marijuana industry has made it halfway through Congress. But there are also serious discussions in Colombia and Guatemala. To talk about this, we're joined by commentator Laura Carlsen in Mexico City. Laura, thanks for joining us. Uruguay's lower house approved a bill that could make it the first country in the world to legalize the production, the sale, and the distribution of marijuana. How exactly would this work?
Well, the government in Uruguay began to see a rise in drug use and in drug-related crime, like it's happening all over Latin America. Of course, we're talking about a small scale here. It's a country of only 3 million people, but they began to study the war on drugs, and what they found is that prohibition and repressive policies had failed everywhere. So they began to look at alternatives, and they were finding that in Uruguay, people were going to buy marijuana on the black market, and were there being pushed into some of the harder drugs, and the big problem they have is cocaine paste. So they decided to look for a strategy that would separate the markets, that would legalize marijuana so that those people wouldn't go into harder drugs, and at the same time have two very important consequences. One, that it reduces the earnings for organized crime, and the other, that it produces revenues for the state through taxing.
Well, Laura, if this passes, Uruguay would have to sell these drugs, sell marijuana at a lower price to compete with the cartels. What repercussions, if any, would there be politically and socially?
Well, they know that it's going to be a big test to make sure that they can offer this product through all the mechanisms that they're developing for legal sales at a lower price than the cartels, because they have to be able to compete in that sense and encourage people to buy legally in order to reduce the business for the drug gangs. But they've set up these systems where there are 4 ways you can buy it. You can get a medical prescription, you can go to a pharmacy and buy up to 40 grams a month, or you can get it through clubs that grow marijuana or through growing it at your home. So there's a number of different options, and they feel that they can supply the market this way, and then even with a government tax, they can still compete to the cartels. Now, what they're hoping is that this will keep people from going to the use of harder drugs, and that this will reduce the earning power and thereby the power within society of the drug cartels. It's a bold experiment, but if they succeed at this, they will have developed a model alternative to the drug war that could both reduce drug use and reduce the violence that's associated with it.
Colombia, Guatemala, and other countries in the region are also looking for alternative ways to control the drug business. Is this becoming a trend across the Americas?
We're definitely seeing a trend, and I think it's probably in many ways unstoppable. This has been happening for several years now. First, there was a major report that came out from former presidents of many countries throughout Latin America saying the drug war has failed, that prohibition has absolutely failed, and it's time to look at alternatives. There still wasn't a real recommendation to legalize, but there was certainly a recommendation to open up the debate. And then we had President Santos, a current president in Colombia, famous for initiating one of the biggest drug wars in the continent, if not the world, as well as Perez Molina in Guatemala coming out and saying, we're no longer going to pay the social costs of the violence that's associated with this, and we want to look at alternatives, including legalization. So this has been building up. We've been hearing about it in forums as important as the Organization of American States, and the big enemy of legalization so far, the big opposition has been coming from the United States, which continues to put a lot of money and effort into counter narcotics. So that's where you're going to see kind of a showdown as we go further and further in legalization of marijuana.
Well, talking about the United States, just directly south, of course, is Mexico, which has been hit very hard by the drug war. We're talking about more than 60,000 people killed in the last 6 years, and now it is also considering legalizing marijuana. Could this work for Mexico?
It could help. I think legalization of marijuana helps in terms of the health aspects, because you're able to treat people more, you're able to eliminate the corruption and the mistreatment that comes with imprisonment and having to deal with corrupt police, and you have more revenues in order to set up addiction centers and treatment centers. The thing about Mexico is that the violence of the drug cartels here is mostly associated to transit from Mexico, through Mexico, to the U.S. market. And what gets consumed here in Mexico is really minimal compared to the market in the United States. So it would be a step in the right direction, and it would be a good example if Mexico legalized marijuana. But for Mexico to see a serious decrease in the power of the drug cartels and the violence here, it requires the United States to legalize.
And Laura, turning back to the United States, we've already seen some individual states approve the legalization for marijuana. What does that say about the stance here? Because the federal government is strongly against it, but could we see the rest of the country follow suit?
Well, I think that's another unstoppable trend, despite the opposition of the federal government. We have Colorado and Washington with legalized marijuana use. California barely voted it down, and a vote will come up again. And there's national polls showing that the majority of the people in the United States favor legalization of marijuana. So we're seeing a real change in attitude, from the demonization of the drug and opposition to marijuana to an acceptance within society and a call for changing the laws. I think little by little, this is going to gain ground. The federal government is going to have to cede in its opposition to both what the states want to do and what the people want to do. And that will mean big changes, not only in the United States, but also throughout the world, where, as I say, the United States has been waging this drug war with high costs within other countries.
Laura Carlsen in Mexico City, thank you for your time and your insight.